Today we're going to be looking at our notes 1.5 on the Constitutional Convention. So we're going to be looking at how the framers of our country, the founding fathers, how they negotiated to create our new Constitution. So setting the stage. By May of 1787, the U.S. was on the verge of crisis. So we had won the revolution, we have our new country, we're the United States of America, but our first constitution, the Articles of Confederation, provided or created a very weak central government. So it wasn't able to handle the problems of a new nation. So there was no executive branch because the founding fathers were fearful of a leader be turned into another monarch. There was no power to tax because they felt that they were overburdened with taxes, and all states had to agree in order to make changes. So again, it was very difficult for the government to function. There's no clear leader. There's no taxes coming in, so that means no revenue for a country to pay for anything. And then in order to change or amend the articles, every state had to agree. Delegates from the states gathered at a convention in Philadelphia to revise the articles, and this became known as the Constitutional Convention. And so initially they wanted to update the Articles of Confederation, but they came to a quick conclusion that they needed to completely start fresh, start from scratch, and create our brand new Constitution. The Constitutional Convention. So representatives from 12 of the 13 states attended. Rhode Island was fearful the convention would strip states' rights, so they did not attend. The convention was 4 months long. Each state had one vote. Decisions were made by a simple majority. Meetings were often held in secrecy, so if you weren't a delegate, you could not attend. 55 delegates attended, and they are known as the framers of the Constitution. Some of the key members included George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. James Madison took the lead and is often known as the father of the Constitution. Setting up a government. The Virginia Plan. So this was presented by the Virginia delegate Edmund Randolph, that the central government be divided into 3 branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial. Each branch could check the other. It called for a strong central government that can make laws and levy taxes, control commerce between the states, and override state laws. So kind of a very strong federal government. They also proposed a bicameral legislature. So bicameral meaning there would be 2 houses of the legislature. But the key point for the Virginia Plan was that it would be based on a state's population. So that would give larger states that had more people, more representatives. So it would favor bigger states. So with this plan, the lower house would be elected by the people, and then the upper house would be appointed by the state legislatures. The other big plan was the New Jersey Plan. So this was presented by the New Jersey delegate, William Paterson, suggesting that the central government be divided into 3 branches, legislative, executive, and judicial. So they're in agreement on that. Each branch could check the other, but they're proposing a unicameral legislature, so 1 house of Congress. And the big difference is that each state would have 1 vote. So it doesn't matter size, but making every state basically equal. Big states could not overpower or outvote the smaller states. And after 3 days of debate, the convention rejected this plan. The Great Compromise. So Roger Sherman of Connecticut created the Connecticut Plan, which is now known as the Great Compromise. So kind of a compromise between the New Jersey and the Virginia Plan. So we would have a bicameral legislature, two houses of Congress. The lower house would be known as the House of Representatives, and this would be based on the state's population. So how large a state is would determine their number of representatives. So a more populous state would have more representatives. members elected by a popular vote, and this pleased states with a larger population. The upper house would be the Senate and would have 2 members regardless of a state's size. So all states would get 2 senators. And so this protected small states with equal representation. So it kind of pleased the larger states because they would have more representatives in the House of Representatives, but then smaller states would have equal representation in the upper house. So members elected, members would be elected by state legislatures. This would eventually be changed with the 17th Amendment, so now people directly elect their senators. And so this was approved in July 16th, 1787. So a few quick notes about this, because when you're proposing things based on population and size, I don't think in 1787 that the Founding Fathers would really realize how disproportionate things would get. So the state of California has 39 million people. So we get 53 representatives in the House. We have a state like Wyoming. So I just looked this up. Maybe it was South Dakota, but it was a small state. Has 581,000 people. So when you look at states like California and Wyoming, the huge discrepancy between 39 million people and 581,000 people for the state. The city of Los Angeles has more people than that. And so we have 51 representatives, they have 1, but then when it comes to the Senate, they still get 2 senators. And we only get 2 senators to represent 39 million people. So each senator is representing 18 million people, where the Wyoming senators are each representing, what would that be, like 65 senators or constituents. So it's very, very disproportionate right now. The issue of slavery. So the issue of slavery played a huge role in developing the Constitution. The issue was not whether slavery would be allowed to continue. 2 key points. 1, whether or not slaves should be counted as part of a state's population. So this would greatly increase a state's population. Those states tended to be in the South, would grant more power to southern states. Northern states said they should not be included because they were not allowed to vote. So we shouldn't count them towards the state's population. The second issue was whether the importation of enslaved people should be allowed to continue. Should the slave trade be allowed to exist? So the 3/5 compromise. The delegates came to a compromise that slaves would be counted as 3/5 a person when determining a state's population. For every 5 slaves, 3 would be counted to determine the state's total population for the House of Representatives. Without the 3/5 compromise, the southern states would not have ratified the Constitution. And so these are issues where we look back and we're like, how could this happen? How could you count a person as 3/5? And so the one thing about our Constitution is that it does allow for change. So we'll have the Civil War in the 1860s. We will pass the 13th Amendment that ends slavery forever. And so it does allow us to change and to update with our kind of like newfound ideas, and we begin to realize, this was wrong, what has happened in the past. We are going to change, we're going to update things. Even when the Constitutional Convention was happening, there were no women there. Women were not allowed to vote until the 19th Amendment. So we see a lot of wrongs happening that don't get corrected until later on in our history. Presidential elections. Some delegates believed the president should be elected directly by the people. Others wanted a president chosen by the state or national legislature. Compromised on a system where the president would be chosen by state electors. State electors would match the number of representatives in both houses. So this established the Electoral College, which is still in use today, so we don't use a popular vote to elect the president. We still use the Electoral College. There's kind of like the House of Representatives, we have a designated number of electors from each state, and then based on how California votes, the electors from California then will vote for who is chosen. So by the summer, the document was ready to be signed, and 39 delegates from 12 states signed it. So the Constitution now needed to be approved by the American people. So in our next notes, we will look more in depth at the Constitution, looking at some of the things that it established, and start talking about it more in depth.